Hey, how are you doing? I got a question for you. What do you do when you want to hear from God? I mean, you would assume we would all want to hear from God throughout the day, but life gets busy and we get distracted and our attention isn't always fully upon God or hearing from Him. And situations arrive that can make it difficult. You know, we've been in a very difficult situation now. There's been a lot of downtime, but a lot of anxiety at the same time. So being anxious can make it hard to hear from God. We're distracted by what's going to happen, how's it going to happen, when's it going to happen. We can be anxious over our job. We can be anxious over school. We can be anxious over relationships we have. So anxiety can make it hard to hear from God. Busyness can make it hard to hear from God. We get tied up and things get hectic, and we run a schedule that starts the moment we get up and maybe runs until we put our head on the pillow. So busyness can make it hard to hear from God, and when you kind of roll those together and drop them all into a time like we've been experiencing over the last couple months, it can be hard to hear from God. And so what do we do? How are we supposed to handle this? And so I want to talk to you about that. And so I've got a little bit of tea here for the end of my day. Join me for just a few minutes. Get yourself settled. And when you are settled, I'd like you to turn to the book of First Kings. First Kings. And we're going to be in chapter 19, where the Lord has been moving in Elijah's life. He's not really been called to be a prophet yet, but there's obviously big things going on. And here's the passage that leads up to Elijah being called to be a prophet. It starts with verse 9. And it says, "Then he, Elijah, came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said to him, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' And he said, 'I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away.' And he said," now this is God speaking to Elijah, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by. And a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. And the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' And the story goes on from there. But here's what I want you to see. We know that one of the attributes of God is his omnipresence. That means that God is everywhere. There's nowhere in creation that God isn't. And God wants to speak to Elijah. Elijah is a little anxious. Things have not been going well for him. A major victory, a couple of defeats, and Elijah's standing there and saying, "Where have you been? I'm the only one that stood up for you." A little bit later on, God's going to tell him, "Well, you're not really the only one. I've got more, but I have something special for you, Elijah." So he tells Elijah where to stand, and there's a storm, there's an earthquake, there's fire, and it says that God was not in them. And what that means, it was not God's intended purpose to reveal himself to Elijah in those circumstances, but he did it in the silence. He did it in a whisper. Now, if you've ever gone to a play, when they begin whispering on stage, the whole audience goes silent, everybody leans forward. And so when God begins to whisper, he has Elijah's full attention. And Elijah's life is very hectic. It's filled with anxiety. And God wants Elijah to slow down so that Elijah can hear him accurately. That's how we hear from God. And when our life is the most hectic, when it can be most filled with anxiety, it is most important for us to slow down. Take an extra half hour, 15 minutes at the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, at the end of the day, and get silent and still before God the Father. Now listen carefully. God is there all the time. He was there in the rumble. He was there in the earthquake. He was there in the fire. But Elijah couldn't hear God until things got still. And that's the same thing for us. If we want to hear from God, we need to get still before Him. Spend some time with Him. Listen for the whisper. Tune our ears, tune our spirits to the presence of the Spirit in us so that we can hear what God wants for us. Because He wants some really great and wonderful things. He wants good things for us. He loves us. He loves you. I hope that blesses you. I hope you have a great night. I love you. I miss you. I'll talk to you tomorrow.